Welcome back to another episode of Built by Us, the podcast where we shine a light on the stories of local entrepreneurs who are driving innovation and growth in our community. I'm your host, Jaime Arroyo, CEO of Assets, and today we have a dynamic duo joining us. Abby is the CEO of Tiny Estates, a unique tiny home community that's redefining how we live. Ryan is the founder of the Red Rose Film Festival, an event that celebrates and elevates the art of filmmaking right here in Central PA. We're going to explore how they've turned their passions into thriving local ventures. Let's get into it. Thank you guys for being here. I actually want to start off with the freak out of going into Mexico or delivering home in Mexico. So tell us a little bit how it kicked off, because I love the way that you were describing it.
Okay, so we were in California. Abby was there on business. I was tagging along with our boys to take a couple days in Los Angeles. And then her mission was to head from Los Angeles to San Diego, down to Mexico. Where in Mexico?
Ensenada, Mexico.
Okay. So about an hour and a half across the border. My understanding was that Abby would be going from where I dropped her off in San Diego across the border to meet a driver, a security guard, so to speak, to a plant where these tiny homes were being built. Mm-hmm. It would take about an hour and a half. Once the hour and a half went by from when she texted me, just crossing the border, don't know how much I'll be able to communicate. I will give you a call when I get there. After the hour and a half, I started thinking about every Netflix special I've ever watched from, well, I won't name all the shows, but in any case, thinking, okay, my wife might not be okay right now. And I was terrified. So from the hour and a half point until when she eventually called me after she had done the facility tour, when she got there, and she was fine the whole time.
And this was probably at like hour and 31 minutes, right?
Exactly. There was no like, are you okay? There was just panic for that whole.
That's not true. There was a text that didn't go through that said, "You okay?" From that text on, not okay. I was freaking out. And then a few hours later, she sent me all these pictures of this wonderful facility and letting me know that she was okay. And I was like, okay, good. I can go back to living now, because I started thinking about like, okay, we have 2 kids. We've got, I don't know where anything is. She organizes everything. What do I do? Yeah. What do I do? I can't leave California. I have to stay here. I have to go back.
That's the real
like he's supposed to come get me or something.
Oh no, I have to stay.
The whole Jason Statham sort of like, I'm going across. It's like, I have certain skills. Yeah. Oh wait, no, I don't. So, hey guys, could you give my wife back?
So Abby, what were you really doing in Mexico?
I was headed there to see a tiny home facility that builds houses. We were going to use one of their models as a showcase. We were meeting with mayors all over San Diego in the different municipalities to try and kind of discuss and showcase what tiny homes could do for homelessness. I mean, obviously in California, there's a huge just affordable housing crisis in general, but they've got a huge homeless population because of that. And a lot of folks who have day-to-day jobs and are willing to work very hard, but just cannot afford to live in that area. And so they've built these like major tent cities. I mean, it feels like a third world country in the middle of such a populated area. And interestingly enough, they were telling me they spend about $2,000 per month per person to put them in a tent.
Wow.
And so we felt like showcasing a tiny house that's $520 a month in a payment and saying, look, you can give somebody something dignified that they can build equity in, that they can then move around as, life changes, if they get a job somewhere else or they have to move to a different location, and trying to work with the municipality to figure out what infrastructure would need to go in and kind of how we could make that work to pivot a lot of the projects they currently have into better housing for people.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, there seems to be large housing crisis that's happening all across the United States. I think we see some challenges right here at home. And when you look at different cities, it seems we all have our own version of what that looks like. What do you see the future of tiny homes being in addressing some of these challenges?
I think the big thing for tiny homes is a lot of people want to do it. I mean, it's awesome because it's such a diverse group of people, everything from the first-time home buyer to the retiree, the person who it's a second home as an investment. We see such a broad demographic, which is great, but zoning and code haven't really caught up yet. And so making sure that builders are doing it to the right standards so that you're not getting ripped off by something that doesn't meet quality. When you buy a typical home, you expect that it, meets code. That's just kind of standard. With tiny homes, that's not always the case. So that evolving, as well as placement. A lot of people build it and then don't know where they can put it. So trying to evolve both of those and working with, as a board member of the industry association, things like that to try and further that will hopefully make it easier for people to be able to buy tiny homes.
Oh, awesome. And so what's a tiny home?
It kind of depends on who you talk to. In my opinion, it's something that's mobile. So by zoning, it'd be anything under 1,000 square feet. For us, it's typically 400 square feet or less and on a trailer. So there's big tax incentives to doing that. You get a write-off on your taxes if you buy a tiny home, but it's also mobile. Think an RV or a mobile home, but way better quality like your standard home. So it'll appreciate over time. It's an asset that you keep, but you could also move it around. You could put your in-laws in your backyard. You could travel. There's a lot of uses for it. So we see a lot of people interested in it these days.
Awesome. So you are the CEO and founder of Tiny Estates.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about that business.
Yeah, so Tiny Estates, we started kind of out of a spiral. I started building a tiny home when I went to a jamboree, not realizing what the heck I was getting into. I was trying to get out of corporate America. I just thought it'd be a fun project. We have an antique store. My family has an antique store in Strasbourg. And so we thought, we'll build one. It'll overlook the farmland. What a fun thing. And that pivoted into not being allowed to have it and trying to scramble to say, okay, I love Lancaster in general. Where can I put it? And after about 3 years of moving it around, finally found about the worst property that exists. It was functioning almost like a mobile home park, but a workaround for people who weren't supposed to do a lot of what they were doing.
They couldn't register, or they had to register their address, but in this particular situation, they did not have to.
So there were some pedophiles, there was a meth lab, there was a medical clinic, and
Okay, so it was rough. It was rough. Let's just
yeah, a little different.
we'll just go rough.
My previous job, I had a concealed carry, and I was kind of used to environments like that. So for me, it was not weird. For the developer who was kind of leasing it back, he figured, I'll put that on the back burner. I don't want my name on that. And I was like, hey, I'll take it over if I can put tiny homes there. So we approached the township and said, listen, normally you don't want to do tiny homes because there's this risk because, they don't meet code or zoning. In this case, it cannot be worse than what's there. So work with us. Let's improve it for you. And so we worked with them to fix up the property, improve the utilities, and pivot it all to tiny homes. That ended up becoming the world's largest nightly rental community for tiny homes. And we did some cool partnerships. Kevin Hart did a house in New York City, things like that. So that was very fun, kind of put us on the map for tiny homes. And then we started getting requests for consultations, whether it's somebody wanting to put one in a backyard or start a whole community or buy one and not knowing who to go to. We've kind of evolved the business around trying to disseminate the right information in the industry.
Wow, that's great. Awesome. And Ryan, you are the founder and executive director of Red Rose Film Festival. So tell us a little bit about that.
I am. But before we do that, let me just say, based on the kind of the format of us being a couple and business owners and entrepreneurs, our first dates, normal people go out to dinner. I tagged along with her on site visits for doing surveys of different campsites so she could do due diligence to determine what the original Tiny Estates site in Elizabethtown would look like.
That's so romantic.
So our first dates were 5 hours in a car, which in all fairness, and you would obviously agree, the first time we spent a significant amount of time together, you were like, this guy's a jerk.
He's crazy, yeah.
But
5 hours in a car with Ryan,
yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah.
This is fair. Okay, I understand. But that being said, it was one of the most unique ways of getting to know someone that, for me personally, that I've ever experienced. So not to leap over it too much because you kind of shared where we are now. But when we started, this was just kind of like a weird introduction where I had just gotten back from California working on a golf championship, and she had just left a very interesting corporate job. And we both landed back in Lancaster. She had an interest. I had an interest in something else, which is the film festival, or at least creating that. And then we just started to collaborate and support one another's ideas as she got to tolerate me and I started to fall in love with her. Are we still there? You're still tolerating me, and
It was a little quicker for you than it was for me, but yeah, that's
Fair
the
enough.
gist of it.
But yeah, so the Red Rose Film Festival was based off of an idea that, and this is actually off of a festival that's in the Midwest in Iowa, of all places. People that I know that are very impactful in the film industry. The current executive director, she and her husband have been in the industry for 30 years. He blows stuff up for a living. He's a practical effects supervisor. He's worked on everything from Forrest Gump to Transformers to so many of the films that
It's like the dream job for a 5-year-old.
yeah, like here we go. This is how, if you want to make rain or you want to blow stuff up, this is how you do it. But what they did so well in Iowa was they took just the exhibition of film and they coupled it with economic development, tourism, education, and love of the arts. I thought, wow, that's a great thing that we can replicate in Lancaster because we don't have it. So in the year that Tiny Estates started, the Red Rose Film Festival was incorporated as a charitable organization. Then we were married in 2018. It's on our front door.
He never remembers.
This was
but
a
I
fight.
don't either. So.
2018, 2019, I'm not sure. It's December 29th. I know that for sure. But that was how it got started because you helped me to go through all of the paperwork and, I mean, your background working for a huge accounting firm. She helped me to organize my life.
Did both businesses start at the same time?
Almost.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for both of us, we wanted to have community impact. Brian's a lot more artsy than I am. I'm a lot more like nuts and bolts. But both of us wanting to impact Lancaster in different ways, we kind of evolved that into our own sectors at the time, and they've both evolved since.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, I remember when it started in 2019 was the first year. Great time to start a community, like a festival.
The more people, the better.
Oh, it's just great. Which conversely, it actually was great for Tiny Estates because the nightly rentals, they were socially distanced, so people could come from all over and they wouldn't have to, they could kind of sequester from the big cities but the purpose was originally to take those different facets of art, education, community, economic development, and tourism, and bring them from all parts of the world and bring them to our community. And selfishly, part of it had to do with my desire to have more film productions made here. And at the time, only a few of those types of productions were being done. So that was really the genesis of why we did that.
Yeah.
But I remember the nights when at 2:00 in the morning, I'm freaking out about like the submission deadline. And then a couple of weeks later, you're freaking out because something's going on at the property. And it's like, I guess you're almost on call when you're partners.
You are as a parent, and I think most people get used to that, but we get used to the evolving, either the kids are sick or there's something wrong at one of the businesses or it's the week of the festival and everything's crazy. You kind of have to learn to juggle all of that at once, which is interesting.
Well, and then the emotional piece of it between you and I to just be like, okay, it's like it's a communication, exercise in communication.
Definitely.
Being two entrepreneurs, technically she's my boss. Both personally and professionally. But I think that's where we've found a lot of great common ground is that one of us will always come to the table and say, I'm sorry first. Sorry I didn't listen. Can we talk about it? So we both have those instances. And I think that's what we do really well in this, this relationship.
This special podcast episode is built by the Lancaster County Community Foundation, which uses this transformational potential of community-based philanthropy and the power of endowment to help shape a Lancaster County where every individual is valued, has a sense of belonging, and has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you to our friends at the Lancaster County Community Foundation for making it possible to provide access to training and lending for entrepreneurs. And when you add kids into that also further challenges the situation sometimes as entrepreneurs, because there's a lot to juggle in that. How have you guys been managing not only your relationship with your children in this process?
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
Long pause.
Well, no, I think there's no such thing as a traditional family structure anymore. In that, like, mom is primarily the one who is taking care of the day-to-day. Our core business is tiny estates. And in many instances, I pick up the slack at home, but when we have time together, it's time together. So we do bedtimes and alternative, like I'll go do bedtime one night, she'll go do it the other night. It depends on what's going on the next day. It's really the communication piece, because we have a 5 and a 2-year-old. Now they're both talking. So when it comes to all of that, it's like, okay, what do you need to do today? What do you need me to do today? And going through all of that, I think that's the way that we always communicate, is like, what are my marching orders in the beginning of the day? And then, hey, what do you say to me? What do you have going on today? I think that it just comes down to the communication.
I think we were both lucky in that we just got to pursue what we wanted. We didn't really have this expectation of like what it would look like. We also didn't think we would be able to have kids as quickly as we did. So being told by the doctors that I probably wouldn't be able to have kids, we were very surprised to have them day one. And so we kind of just got thrown into that, just like we did with the businesses succeeding. And
we're sticking to that. We're sticking to it. Day one.
It's an awesome problem to have, but definitely kind of surprising in its own right. So you're just kind of learning as you go. With parenthood, with the businesses, it's kind of take the things as they come, and the problems as they arise. And kids they're malleable. They're flexible. During COVID, when we had our first son Jackson, I remember having him like up in the loft and being like, okay, let's barricade it so we can clean the bed, or let's because we were trying to give staff time off, or not knowing what was going to happen with guests. It has very much evolved, and we've winged it basically.
I don't disagree. I think we've always given something to each other's individual business or goal. Like and up until this past year, I'd go clean houses and get that done in the morning after I dropped the boys off at school. She would help me with, I don't know anything about QuickBooks, and she does, and she's okay, I can't teach a man to fish, I guess. But so we've always kind of ping-ponged back and forth. And don't get me wrong, there are fights, not knockout, drag-out fights, but there are like, you said you were going to do this, blah, 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 blah. Mostly it's her yelling at me, which is fair. But
that's exactly how I assumed it would be. So
who wouldn't? Anyone who knows me would assume that.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's always in the best interest of the other person, though. Like when I get frustrated, it's like you're not doing enough for yourself to get to the next step, or so-and-so is not looking out for you. You need to stand up for yourself. And he does the same for me. So-and-so is taking advantage, or the guest shouldn't do that. You need to set better standards. Like it's always in the interest of the other person. And I think that's helped both of us proceed in that we're always trying to lift the next one up. And unlike probably a traditional couple, as people would consider it, there's one person who has that business and they're kind of always helping. I think with us, it's been good to be able to balance it, because we're always kind of doing that for one another, and we have this understanding of what the other one's going through. It's been nice to be able to identify with some of what he deals with.
I love you.
When both of you said community impact as part of one of the drivers for both of the businesses, what does community impact mean for each of you, and how are you guys using your business to further that?
I think for me, it's not just monetary. A lot of people figure, Tiny Estates is a for-profit business, so we're just in it to make a dollar. for me, tiny homes are a way for people to get ahead, whether it's as an investment or because it's more financially savvy, to buy a tiny home and to live within their means, or to save a bunch and be able to travel. And I think a lot of people during COVID realized what was important to them. And so downsizing their footprint of where they live isn't always just for sustainability, but for more of an impact of their surroundings. So we've created this sense of community within the people that now are there, that you start to see people balancing off of one another, caring about, watching this person's kids or helping that person go get groceries because they don't have a car. So we've really wanted to bring that to other communities, which was our reason for going to California and trying to say, how can we use this for homeless, or how can we, we've just started creating, since he has a 501 for a foundation for tiny homes, so that we can donate a portion of every house sold to then impact other communities, whether that's, someone who needs a down payment assistance or someone needs an entire home, that we can start to kind of target the areas of need and evolve that as we grow to not just be about money, but also be about impacting people's lives.
Great.
I got to follow that. Awesome. No, I'm kidding. But the Red Rose Film Festival, my goal for it is that it was one thing in the beginning where I said, like, selfishly, when I started it, I was hoping more films would be brought here. It's still that goal. But what I'm realizing is we have such a great opportunity uniquely in Lancaster and central Pennsylvania to advocate for all of the students and the young people and the career filmmakers that have created lives and careers for themselves here, with groups like the groups out in Lidditz, to feel like they don't have to export their talents outside of our community specifically to create a wonderfully fulfilling career. And that's come up in the last few years of watching our program having to kind of manipulate how we were even going to function in the space. We only took 1 year off in 2020 because we didn't want to be a digital medium. We didn't want to screen films the way that the filmmakers didn't originally intend, which was to screen their films in theaters. So we took that year off. But beyond that, we have always advocated for using vendors, small businesses, and sticking to the resources that we have in Lancaster to create an atmosphere and an environment for these creative minds, but also the minds of those who are below the line when it comes to how the hierarchy of filmmaking works, like directors, actors, producers. Those are typically your above the line careers. There are so many wonderful careers that you can have that are considered below the line that our film schools, 5 of them at least, that advocate for those types of careers. So we're just helping to complement the platforms that are already out there, like the groups in Lidditz and the different small businesses that are here, so that we can perpetuate a message of Lancaster supports your creative endeavors and your careers moving forward.
Love that. Yeah, and when you think about Lancaster, it's really a unique place. Both of you left, I believe, Lancaster for a little bit and then came back. So why did you guys come back, and why Lancaster to start these initiatives? And what do you think Lancaster could do to be the example for a creative community and also thinking about the future of housing?
I can say why I came back, but you go ahead.
You came back because of me, ultimately.
Obviously. Yeah.
I never went too far. I lived in Philly, but had to commute a lot for work. I wasn't allowed to work where I lived, basically. So coming back for me, not only is our family here and there's, comfort and stability with that, but Lancaster is very good at, how did someone say it the other day? Lancaster loves Lancaster. It's very good at being innovative if it's something that puts it on the map. And so a lot of people, I had a tour today and the woman said, oh, well, when I Googled it, Lancaster is one of the most tiny home friendly places. And I said, well, that's only because of our community, but people like that. Lancaster has pumped up the fact that they did something that was innovative, that was the world's largest. And so I think there was a collaborative effort with the township and with the mentality here that people were willing to try something new if it meant putting them on the map. And so we've even had discussions about affordable housing communities in massive chunks of like 100 here, 100 there, with developers who are a lot more inclined to say, I'll do something outside of the normal realm just because in Lancaster they have that mentality, which is really cool.
Nice.
For the Red Rose, I left in 2008 when I graduated school. My first job was with Warner Brothers in Los Angeles. My goal eventually was to become an actor, and I was working with them in their marketing department as a marketing assistant. It was also at the time of the first financial crisis, at least one of the more recent ones. And I was realizing that I just wasn't happy. I was by myself. I was too young to feel like I had the drive or the initiative to go out and like really know what I wanted to do. So I came back. And then in 2017, when I came back, I was on a contract that took me out to California in Northern California in the Bay Area for a golf championship where I was working on a marketing team, again, in large event space. And after that contract was done, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was offered a job out there to stay long term. Didn't feel like the right place. And I was already having ideas about this project and came back and there was at least some idea that I could figure it out. But I was done with California after 2017. And then I found purpose well, I did meet you. That's true. So, yeah. But I found purpose in a mission that was bigger than myself and started creating from there. And then, like we had already shared, kind of like that's how we created the roots here and wanted to build out from this community, getting to know what this community values. And I mean, that's how I met you. It's actually funny. Not too many people know this, but the first time
Yes.
I met Jaime was because
These are the origin stories.
was because Jaime could do upside down push-ups.
What does that mean?
I was working with David Godin
Okay.
on a commercial, a spec commercial for Reebok, and I forget what the tagline was, to be honest with you. It's
Was
like
it the
something
Be More
fire.
Human, or I forget if that
I thought
was
it had fire in it. I don't remember.
No.
But essentially, you were doing what you're still doing today, which is being a gladiator.
In my free time. That's
But that's how I met Jaime.
But what is an upside down push up?
Oh,
I'm
you
like
you
envisioning.
throw
Can we
your-
demonstrate? I don't know
Yes,
if we
please.
should.
You throw yourself up against
We'll do
the
that
wall
later.
upside down and
So David reached out to me, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm filming a commercial for Reebok, and would love for you to be in it, and doing CrossFit stuff, and we're doing these workouts. So we go to CrossFit Collective, which is it's a CrossFit gym on Manhattan Pike, and it's called The Box, but it's just a warehouse where, there's like no heat and no air conditioning, but it was probably, I don't know, 10 degrees or 20 degrees that day. So yeah, David and Ryan had me, shirtless doing
True.
upside down push-ups and
Fair enough.
lifting weights in this warehouse where my breath, you can see my breath. That's how
Very
good it was.
cinematic.
So I think some great shots. It was a cool video.
I'm gonna have to see this ad.
Yeah.
Well,
Still out there
But that's
somewhere?
that's how we
Yeah.
first met.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah, a
out
while
there
back.
somewhere,
Yeah.
and look how far we've come.
Yeah. So we're keeping our clothes on for this interview, but yeah,
I certainly am.
and we have heat, so that's great, or AC. So
Whatever it is, it's going great. It's going great.
yeah.
That's so interesting.
This episode is built by the Reimagining Our Community Giving Circle. The ROC Giving Circle is a way for the community to support BIPOC-owned small businesses through collective philanthropy. The Giving Circle is managed by the ROC cohort, and its purpose is to facilitate funding to initiatives that support BIPOC-owned small businesses. To learn more, visit roclancaster.org. So where do you guys see the future of your businesses going? So Lancaster, I think, is a very special community that, in my opinion, I think it is and can be the example for other communities across the country of what economic development could look like in an equitable way, what the future of business could look like, and worrying more than just making profits, but how do you impact people and planet at the same time? So where do you guys see the Red Rose Film Festival, Tiny Estates going, and how is Lancaster helping to shape all of that?
With the film festival, I think we had a little bit of a slowdown between 2020 and 2024. I think we're getting some momentum now that we had in 2019. And I think in many ways, there are so many people in this community that, one, support the arts, support the development, and people coming to this community and seeing what we have to offer. It used to be global perspectives for local impact. I've started to think a little bit differently in that it's not just the global perspectives of the films that we're bringing in from all over the world, but we also have a lot to offer in the films that we're showcasing from our own community. I can rattle off several different film companies that are right here in Lancaster that are doing wonderful work, but they're also owned by people of so many different backgrounds. They are entrepreneurs. And my goal, hopefully, and it's ever evolving, but my goal is that more filmmakers that are sharing their work with us, we can conversely share our work with them, and they want to collaborate more here. Because one, we have wonderful landscapes. We have a great infrastructure, and it's a developing infrastructure. And the economic impact that can be created not only for just like exhibiting film, but also for the small business community, for the educational, higher education, as well as K through 12, for tourism in general. I think a lot of people can be positively impacted by what a film can do to a local economy like ours, across all different backgrounds and demographics. So it's a bigger lift than just one festival, but we're a complement to a lot of different groups that are trying to make an impact, and we can be a platform for that.
Interesting. So
Interesting. What do you mean interesting? You've heard all this.
it kind of seconds what I'm thinking in that I don't think we're going to be the housing type for everybody, but I think if we can facilitate some better understanding with the municipalities, a lot more discussion and collaboration, we can become an area where people don't have to leave because they can't afford it, or they don't have to rent because it's outside of their means to own. I want to create an environment where we have a housing type that fixes it, but because of the collaboration and conversation, people look at Lancaster and say like, well, I'd love to move there because it does have booming business and there are the arts and I can afford to live there. And I think Lancaster already has so much going for it, but a lot of people, we were just saying, are moving to Marietta where we live just because the city's getting more and more expensive. So if we can keep it affordable for people with a lot of different housing types and that collaboration, I think that will help business and that will help draw even more people here, whether it's for vacation rentals or ownership.
And to your point, the one word that I don't want to skip over is we talk about equity, but also dignity. There are people who have gone through plenty of obstacles in their lives where owning a home is part of the American dream. So in this respect, having ownership in an actual piece of property, whether or not it's chassised on wheels or it's foundational, owning a home is part of the American dream. So that piece of equity and dignity, I think, is a huge part of what we're discussing, not only in our community, but in other communities across the country that Abby has. She's very modest, but she spends a lot of time understanding how this type of home ownership can be placed in communities around the country.
I love that. I think, and it also brings us back to where just a few decades ago, many families actually spent their time in homes with smaller footprints. So I think a lot about my family in Puerto Rico. If we go up to the mountains of Ponce and see some of the homes that my dad's family grew up in, there are multiple homes that today would be considered a tiny home. And oh man, my grandparents, raised 13, 14 kids in those series of homes. And eventually, they still own those houses to this day. But I think it's a more modern perception that we're supposed to have these massive houses and with massive footprints, that actually tiny homes gets us back to the root, to our roots, I think, and making sure that we're more focused on building community than just having a home.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Without a doubt. And recently talking to Lancaster City, they were saying if we did 10,000 units, it would only be 4% of the housing in Lancaster that would be tiny. So I think we're far from having, everybody thinks, oh, you're going to become China where everything is small and you're packed together. We're so far from that we can add a lot of different housing types and still offer something for everyone, because I think there are a lot of communities that do have smaller houses, and I think it creates a happier, warmer, more connected environment when you're in a small space.
Yeah, I agree. So one word that comes to mind every time I think about entrepreneurs or folks that are building something, creating something, is legacy. I'm curious for you guys, what does legacy mean to you? And is there someone in your life that has demonstrated what leaving a legacy is?
That's a good question. I think legacy for me is, a lot of people think it's financial, that you're going to leave something for your kids, right? To me, it's almost, how many people come to your funeral and speak highly of you, how many people are sad to see you go, and how many people have you impacted. So if we can create community where just because I'm gone, they're still together and they still take care of one another and they still look out for one another, I think that creates a legacy where I feel like they continue beyond me, and that my kids have something that they can be proud of. Now, we'd love to leave them things as well, but even in owning a tiny home, a lot of people, it's a stepping stone. They're not doing it forever, but they're young and they're starting out, and then they get that money, and when they sell it, they have their down payment for a larger house, right? Or they're older and retired, and that's something they can then leave their kids. You're not renting where you're worried that you're not going to leave that legacy and you're not going to be able to give them anything. So I think just being able to sustain that for people is important. And who I would say was a legacy for me, Ryan and I were actually introduced by his grandmother. So I got my real estate license when I was looking for a property to do tiny estates, and she was the broker my family had always used. And so I listed my real estate license with her, and then she's the one that kind of introduced us. So I really credit her with a lot of teaching me, properties, having such a pride for Lancaster and loving this town. So I think I would probably say Burger.
You son of a bitch. So Berger passed away in January. It's something that's come up since her passing in January. I don't, the impact that she left on our family, the community, like Abby said, she used to take people on a 2-hour long trip before they even saw a home around the Lancaster community, saying, and I'll abbreviate, but can you see yourself living here? If you can see yourself living in this community, then I'll show you some homes. But she'd take them to Central Market. She'd take them to some of the landmarks. She'd take them over the Fulton. She sold Lancaster before she sold homes. And I think as a legacy, in fact, we even came up with it before she was gone, but a legacy of Lancaster was the tagline. And I think for Abby and I, professionally, we'd love for our businesses to leave a lasting mark where if we're gone, they still exist. Personally, I would love for my kids to remember their parents as fondly as I think of my mom, my grandmother, my uncles, everyone, my friend, the ones who impacted me in loving this community. So, yeah, sorry for that emotional response. Oh man, yeah, I didn't think I'd even react that way, but here we are.
Yeah, I think legacy is impact for us. It's people feeling like we impacted them and having that impact continue.
Yeah, I love that. yeah, whether it's your grandmother or you guys, I think you guys are leaving a lasting legacy in creating community, whether it's literally building homes of communities or the creative community and bringing people together. It's very cool to see that. Yeah, it's passed down for sure. And I think it's going to continue to pass down. So really appreciate you guys taking the time to
We're
share
grateful.
your journeys, and really grateful to have you guys in the Lancaster community.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wrap for this episode of Built by Us. A big thank you to Abby and Ryan for sharing their journeys and the incredible work they're doing with Tiny Estates and the Red Rose Film Festival. If you're as inspired as I am, make sure to check out Tiny Estates and mark your calendar for the next Red Rose Film Festival. And be sure to tune in next time as we continue to highlight the local entrepreneurs who are building a brighter future for all of us. Until then, I'm Jaime Arroyo, and this is Built by Us.
This is the Built by Us podcast, brought to you by Assets. Visit us at assetspa.org to learn more about the products and services we provide, and you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube.